All right, welcome back to the 2086 NBA playoffs. We are in the second round, the NBA Western Conference semifinals, and we're right about to tip off the OKC versus Dallas Mavericks matchup in here in the second round, man. And before we get into that, though, I just wanted to give a little bit of backstory to the Mavericks. I know we went in depth with OKC in one of the earlier videos, and I briefly spoke about the Mavericks as well, but I wanted to get really more in depth this time around before we get into this series, because this series promises to be a good one, folks. We got the 4-seeded OKC versus the 8-seeded Dallas Mavericks. Yes, the 8th seed in the second round. They ended up beating the Los Angeles Lakers. I know the last time you guys saw that matchup, the Lakers were going up 3-2. And so, now looking at it, as you can see, Dallas had advanced and eliminated the 1 seed Los Angeles Lakers. And it was just a little bit of a bad matchup for the Lakers. Some of their stars did not play very well. Lucas Fleming, he averaged 31 points a game during the regular season, dropped all the way down to 23 points a game, 39% from field goal percentage during the playoffs. So that was a big reason why they lost. Nate Moore did not do amazing. None of their guys did amazing. And so the Mavericks moved on. And let's get into this backstory, man. So we start off with number 1. I got to tell you about Wade Randall, man. This guy is him. Basically, like this dude is drafted. Look at these. Just look at his accolades. Like, I don't even gotta say it. I don't even gotta say it myself. You can see for your damn self. 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA. Yes, he's been in the league for 7 years. He was drafted in 2079 with the 2nd overall pick. He won Defensive Player of the Year in 2083, and obviously first team All Defense. And he was first team All Rookie. And he might have even won Rookie of the Year. I'm pretty sure he did, because who the hell else would have won it, right? Hold on, we can check that. Hold on, we can fact check this. Let me see. Most Valuable Player. Let's go to Rookie of the Year. And 2079. Okay, that was Junior Neely. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so that draft, ironically enough, that had 3 big men at the top of the draft, and it was pretty consensus that Junior Neely would be the first overall pick. Let's look at him real quick. He was the first overall pick to Memphis. This dude has been balling out. They have no complaints. Yeah, this dude is like, he was touted as a generational prospect, 7 feet. He's only 25 years old. He's putting up 29 and 11 and 2 steals and 2 blocks. So he's doing very well for Memphis right now. But they were actually in similar situations, because Wade Randall, he was drafted right after him, 2nd overall. And the funny thing is, they had an interesting little dilemma, because this guy right here, Bernard Toscano, he was the 3rd overall pick in that draft. So they had 3 centers, top 3. Like they were like the lock of the top of the draft. They were saying, okay, which order do you take these 3 centers? Because they were all viewed as very good, and they all seemed like, they had the same ceiling, damn near. Like they were all 7 foot, like monsters in college and stuff. And so they're like, fuck, I don't know which one to pick. Memphis went ahead and took Junior Neely, and then Dallas, they had to choose between Wade Randall and Bernard Toscano. They said, fuck it, we're taking Wade. We're taking my boy. We're taking Wadey. And they did, and they just, I don't know what it was. I think he had a little bit more of a swagger to him. Maybe he had a little bit more of a little bit of flair in his step, a little more pep in his step. He just showed that dog a little bit more. And so it was kind of a toss up, though. It wasn't a super clear-cut decision, even though it would be now, because Bernard Toscano's career has taken a long winding road of ups and downs, to be honest. He's currently in Sacramento. He's currently in Cancun, actually, I should say. He was in Sacramento. They got eliminated first round, so he's enjoying a nice vacation right now. But we are still, there's still basketball to be played, folks. And Wade Randall is on a tear right now. He's averaging 27 points, 13 rebounds, 2.6 blocks, and 3.4 steals during the playoffs so far. Absolutely insane. And some of his early playoff runs. So this team was pretty good. A little bit more on the backstory of this team. This team was good during the 60s and 70s. They had a guy named Cole Jamison, who was 7'4". Yes, he was 7'4". He was like the first overall pick back in 2065, something like that. And they had another guy named Jamie Moore, who they're both retired by now, but those two were basically like the pillars of Dallas basketball for a very long time, over 10 years. And the highlight reel of that run, like the pinnacle of that era of Dallas basketball, was the fact that they made the NBA Finals in 2071, where they were promptly gentlemen swept by the Detroit Pistons and Juan Carlos Chavez. But they still had a lot of conference finals runs. They still had, a little bit of fun, whatever. But it was kind of a disappointing roster. They were hoping that they could win a championship. They made some interesting trades, but they were never bad, but they just never could really get over the hump. And so they ended up trading away Cole Jamison, actually, in 2077 as an old man, and that started their rebuild. Unfortunately for them, they had no draft picks. Like, they spent all that time in the 70s and stuff trading away their draft picks and, trying to contend for a championship. And so now that they traded away their star and they were trying to rebuild, they didn't have any draft picks. And so the team was horrible. The team was abhorrent, god awful for a couple years now. Let's look at these numbers here. Look at this shit, bro. Look at this. I don't even got to tell you. Look for yourself. All this time they were winning games, right? This is when Jameson was drafted, 65. And then within a couple years, 68, 47 wins, and then 69, 55 wins, and then 57, 59, 58, 61, 58, right? So they were a really good team, early 70s, late 60s. And so they kind of taper off during the mid 70s, and then they trade away him. And look at this, man. 2078, they won 29 games, guys. And then look at this shit, bro. This is just pathetic. They won 14 games 3 years in a row, from 2078 to 2081. They won 14 games literally for 3 seasons straight. And then they won 22 games in 2082. And so mind you, Wade Randall is on these teams. And look at these numbers that he was putting up. He was drafted in 2079. He came in immediately in the 2080 season, averaging 20 points a game, 8 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, right? All rookies, first team, all that. The next year, in 2081, he averaged 26 and 8, 2 blocks a game, 7 assists. And the next year, in 2082, he averaged 30 and 9, and then 39 and 9, and then 2 blocks and 2 steals a game. Literally. Like, just like this guy was just the superstar of the league, but yet he was on a terrible team. It was crazy. And so the Mavericks were literally just like grasping at straws here, like just trying to get any little ounce of supporting cast around him before he demands a trade, because he was putting up these crazy numbers and they were losing. Look at that year that I just said, they won 22 games, right? And then the next year they only won 43 games. They didn't even make the playoffs until 2084, which was like his 5th or 6th year in the league, and probably like 4th or 5th year averaging 30. So it was just crazy. Like, that just shows you how bad they really were outside of this guy. And so they tried to quickly, and so they were bad, but they did eventually recoup their draft picks in the 80s. And so they drafted Elliot Robbins right here, number 2 overall, back in 2081. And he's been just everything that they could ask for. He's 6'10". They took a little bit of a chance on him, took a bit of a reach. He was always a great player, like in college and stuff. He came from LaSalle University, and he was good. He's 6'10". He can do everything. He can defend, he can shoot, he can rebound, whatever. And, but there was some questions. He actually has a slight bit of a short wingspan for someone his height. If you look at player comparison, hold up, let me find this guy, because he looks a little bit funny. But he's damn good though. All jokes aside. Yeah, he only has a 6'11" wingspan, but he's 6'10". So he looks a little bit funny. His jump shot looks a little bit funny too. But his career averages of 25 points a game, sorry. His career averages 25 points a game, 7 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, 1.9 steals are nothing to shrug at all, especially as a second to third option. And nowadays 4th option. We'll get to that. But yeah, so that was a great draft pick, 2nd overall in 2081. And mind you, like, this team is really bad. And so they had to nail these picks because they got Wade Randall waiting in the wings, and they're just like trying to convince him to stay. Please stay with us, please. We're trying to put a team together around you. Just wait, just be patient, please. Please do not leave us. And he obliged. He was still putting up his numbers or whatever. He was still a young guy. And so the next year, 2082, the year that we talked about already, they drafted Dan Hardaway, 6'7" from high school actually, but 6th overall pick. He slipped to number 6. But he's been averaging 26 points a game, 6 and 6, 2 steals a game for his career so far, 4 years in. And he averaged 30 points a game this past season. And like I said, he didn't make the All-Star team because there's like 20 guys in the league averaging 30. But all that to say, they nailed that draft pick as well. So they nailed a lot of their draft picks in this era, which is pretty good, which is pretty remarkable. But the first draft pick that they had in this era was actually none other than Peter McGuire, who we talked about in the earlier episodes. This guy right here, he's a 6'4" point guard. He was drafted 2077, 5th overall. So they drafted him to be the franchise point guard, and they actually drafted him to play alongside Cole Jameson, because the point guard that they had during Cole Jameson's era, he had been retired and he was old, and the roster had aged to that point and deteriorated to a corpse. And so they had Cole Jameson there, and he was the last guy to stick around until 2077, which the team was not good. And they tried it out for a little bit, for like half a year of 2077. They tried it out. They wrote it out with Peter McGuire as the rookie point guard, along with Cole Jameson. And I know his numbers, like this rookie year numbers, they look crazy. He averaged 27 points a game his rookie year, Peter McGuire. Like, he looks crazy. I will tell you that was not the case for the first maybe month and a half of the season. Okay, he did not play amazing that first month. He didn't play bad, but he didn't play amazing. And so that was like the kind of the final straw that just said, all right, we're giving up and we're going to trade Cole Jameson. They traded him to the Nets for, some picks and shit, but they wanted it to work out. Like a lot of teams do this. They try to bridge the gap. They try to take the veterans with a talented young guy or whatever. And sometimes it works, but most of the time you probably just have to just choose one area, And so they chose the youth movement. And so Peter McGuire was Wade Randall's point guard for all these years. But look at these assists. These assists are not very good for a point guard starting in the league nowadays. Nowadays in the league, you need to average at least 10 assists a game, or at least close, at least 9. Right? This dude was averaging 6 assists a game as a point guard. So that just wasn't cutting it, straight up. It just wasn't. And so he was in Dallas for a long time though, because like I said, they didn't have many draft picks, they didn't have many assets either, and so they needed all the talent they can get. They kept whoever they had, and so he stuck around in Dallas for a long time despite his low assist numbers. They secretly wanted to get rid of him low key, but they were just letting him score and stuff because they had nobody else, and Peter McGuire was getting anxious, right? And so McGuire stays in Dallas for 5 years, and he gets shipped out in the 2082 off season. And he gets shipped out alongside this guy right here. Let me find him. Jonathan Carter right here. He was the 26th pick in 2078, 6'6" guard from Drake, and he's just a pure scorer. He came into the league without having much defense whatsoever. He doesn't have long arms. He's not very muscular, but he can put that ball in the basket. Boy, can he do that. He was very efficient from the gate, averaging 47% from the field goal, 40% from three, about 75% from the line in his rookie year as a 26th overall pick. And so that was a pretty good win. And then the second season in the league, he was averaging 11 points off the bench. And then his third season in the league, 2081, he's averaging 23. And then he started averaging 25 in 2082. But mind you, this is a horrible team. And so those numbers were seen as kind of empty because they literally just needed somebody to score. They had Randall and they had McGuire and they had this guy Jonathan Carter, and no one else could fucking score on that team. And so he had to put up a lot of points. So yeah. Anyway, they basically packaged Carter and McGuire because of McGuire's playmaking limitations and his low assist numbers, and Jonathan Carter's lack of physicality despite his good scoring prowess. His lack of physicality and stuff really caused him to just part ways and go a different direction at point guard, which was really like the main focus. I feel like if they could put a good point guard next to Wade Randall, then they would really unlock this team. And so what did they do? They went out and got Darren Griffin, the guy that we talked about earlier in the Louisville Liberty episode. But Darren Griffin, he started off in Louisville, and then he went to Houston and was hooping. Look at these numbers: 25 and 9, 26 and 9, 28 and 9, 26 and 10, 25 and 10. Right? So he was hooping. Look at this shit. He jumped up. 2081, he was averaging 24 and 13, 26 and 12. In 2082, like he was hooping. But these Houston teams are also not very good, so it was taken with a grain of salt. And so he wasn't viewed as a super hot commodity as a point guard, but he was seen as an upgrade over McGuire for sure. And so they packaged them sent him to Houston for Darren Griffin. So Darren Griffin comes in. He doesn't score very much, but he was the assist man that they needed. He comes in, averages about 12 assists per game, with Randall there and then Robbins and Hardaway and stuff. And so that was the playmaking that they needed, and he was kind of a cheap option relatively. They didn't have to give up the whole farm for him. And so that was a decent little trade. That was in the 2082 offseason. And actually, funny story, the guy, they ended up, wait, hold up. This is Houston. And then Drew Haywood came in when exactly? He left in 2085. Yes. Oh yeah, so the guy that we had as the point guard during Cole Jameson's era, Drew Haywood, he was traded for Darren Griffin in a weird 3-team trade back in 2075, and so that was kind of funny. But anyway, that's besides the point, honestly. But I mean, actually, just a quick little note about that: they made the final 2071, right? They traded 2 of those starters for 2 starters from Charlotte, and Charlotte was a good team at that time too. And so there were 2 teams that swapped 2 starters, and so that was a pretty wild trade. Looking back, and then the Hornets actually made the finals with those additions, and then the Mavericks ended up slowly tapering off. And so say what you want about that. But anyway, let's move on. So we talked about Darren Griffin, and then we talked about our starting 5 so far. We got to talk about this guy Ted Fleming. And so Ted Fleming, he started off in Charlotte, 10th overall pick, 2078. He comes in, averages 13 and 6, 1.5 blocks, decent, like barely like crossing the road of decent. And then the second, but he was very efficient though, 55% from the field. That's great. And so he was starting for a lot of that season. But then the next year he didn't start very much because those numbers weren't super promising to the Hornets organization. And then the next year after that, he averaged 16 and 9. And again, as a center, they really want you averaging double-digit rebounds and closer to 2 blocks per game. He was only averaging 1.4. They'd rather it be 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, stuff like that, like in the league. And so he wasn't like a crazy rebounder, wasn't a crazy shot blocker, but also Charlotte wasn't super duper good at this point. They had kind of tapered off since the trade that I spoke about previously. And so they were like, and so he was kind of a rock for them at the center position. He wasn't great, but he wasn't bad whatsoever. He was a solid NBA player that they had, and that was saying something for that Charlotte roster, because they didn't have very many solid NBA players during this time. And so they had him. He was kind of holding down the front court for a while. Eventually, they just part ways with him because he was getting up in his prime, and the team still wasn't really where they wanted to go. They kind of wanted to pivot away from him, and so they shipped him away to Dallas. They didn't really get a whole bunch back for him, honestly, if I'm being honest. They probably got a couple picks for him, but I can't even remember who the hell the Mavericks traded away to get him. So they kind of got him on the cheap, and and he's been balling out this playoffs though. He's averaging 10 points, 10 rebounds. He's averaging 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 blocks a game so far. So he's really playing up, past what people thought he could do. So that's great. And so they got this starting five they had Griffin, and then they had Hardaway, Robbins, Fleming, Randall. That was their starting five, right? And they made the playoffs. Finally, they finally made the playoffs in 2084. That was their first playoff appearance. And mind you, Wade Randall was drafted in 2079. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons, 3 of which he averaged 30 points a game and 10 rebounds. But finally, it took them 5 seasons to finally make the postseason. They win the first the first play-in game, and they get the 7th seed. They match up against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they promptly lose in 5. The team, they were very inexperienced. They were running on fumes, man. Like they were just trying to get something together. They're trying to make the playoffs just to get him in the postseason. Like that was their main goal. They wanted to get him into the postseason. And so they had a rookie, damn near rookie Hardaway, damn near rookie Robbins, very young team. They just put together enough to make the playoffs that year, and so they lost. The next year, 2085, they lost again. They made it to the 8th seed this time, and again, look at Wade Randall averaging 28 and 12, and they only made the 8th seed, unfortunately. And so they were taken out by OKC, the eventual champions of that year. So do what you want with that. But they were taken out by OKC in the first round in 5 games. And at this point, Wade Randall's about 28 years old, right? Because he's an old rookie. That's something I forgot to mention. Not only is he really good really early, despite the Mavericks not having a whole bunch of other assets to properly build around him, he's old. He came into the league at about 22 years old. So he's only in the seventh year in the league, and he's already 29 years old. Okay, so he's almost 30. Like the clock is really, really ticking. And so they pulled the trigger this past trade deadline. They went out and got Henry Gilbert, who has been a San Antonio beloved for over 12 years. He was drafted 6th overall back in 2074, and he's been hooping for them. He averages 28 and 10 and 2 steals a game for his entire career over 12 years. Okay, so that just tells you all you need to know. He's a 10-time All-Star and a 5-time All-NBA member. 5-time All-NBA point guard. And the Spurs, during this time, they had a lot of high win seasons, but I don't even think they ever made the conference finals. If they did, it was once. And I'm almost positive they didn't. Even when they had high seedings, they would always lose for whatever reason. The team was good, but not great. And so all these years, whatever, they finally blew it up this past trade deadline. And so now Henry Gilbert is on the Mavericks, and the Mavericks gave up literally every single draft pick that they have access to at this point. And so they won't have any draft picks until like the mid 90s. And it's 86 right now. So they are really, really going all in on this core. And fair enough, right? Like this is if you're gonna go all in on a core, this is a core to go all in on. You already have a super duper star Wade Randall, and you pair him with an all NBA caliber point guard like this that he's been needing. McGuire was decent. Griffin was fine. He got them into the postseason. He kind of bridged that next step for him. But Henry Gilbert is like a bona fide star point guard in this league. Like he has been for a long time. He's very relevant. Everybody knows him. And so that 2-man duo is insane. Add Dan Hardaway and Robbins on the wings. Now you have a four cog system. You have 4 dudes that can give you 25 plus a night. And that is how you win championships in this league. You can't just have 2 or 3. You need 4. Okay, so they achieved the 4, right? They got the 4 horsemen. Now they're ready to fight. And you see, they took out the Los Angeles Lakers in the first round. And so, like, they're doing good. And they actually won game 1 versus the OKC Thunder, who are currently the reigning champions. But they won game 1 in OKC. And so they're planning on, going in there and at least trying to do the same thing in game 2. And so we will see. But a little bit about this bench. Matt Brand, he had an up and down career, but he started off in OKC. He was shipped to San Antonio for poor numbers, and he was kind of solid for all those years. He was with Henry Gilbert. Look at all these years. He was in San Antonio for many, many years, along with Henry Gilbert. And so they shipped off Henry Gilbert to Dallas, and they shipped off Brand to Dallas as well because he was old. And that's a very common thing in this league. Whenever a star gets traded to a team, a lot of times they take some a starter or two from the previous team along with them, because a lot of times they're old and aging anyway, and on a maybe an expiring contract or a hefty contract that the team would just rather get off of, especially if they're trading away stars and stuff and trying to rebuild. And so that's what the Spurs did. They shipped off Gilbert and they said, fine, you can take Brand too, right? He's already 34. They're not going to really do much with him at this point, trying to pivot into a younger type of team. And so he's a very big body off the bench, very stable guy, and he's actually playing fantastic. Look at this shit. Oh my gosh. Holy moly. He's averaging 75% true shooting percentage. Oh my goodness. This dude is playing fantastic right now. That's amazing. Willis Baylor, this guy was in Miami for a long time. He's an undrafted player. He has a crazy work ethic. He worked and grinded his way into the NBA. He was undrafted, like I said, and he carved out a nice role for himself as a 3-and-D wing. He's 6'8", and he could be really, he has no flaws in his game, to be honest. He can do everything that anyone else could do. You know, he can shoot, he can rebound, he can pass, he can drive. You know, just not at a superstar level, but you know, at a worked for, earned type of level. You know, he didn't have like the talent. You know, he didn't come in with the talent of Wade Randall or Henry Gilbert or anything. He came in with grit and determination, and he's a self-made player. God damn it, put some respect on it. But no, he's a solid player. He's not gonna make an all-star team or anything like that, but solid player for sure. Very efficient. We got Zach Jeffries, who was in New York, and they shipped him off. Well, they didn't ship him off. They actually just let him walk. He had some potential in New York, but they just had a really deep team, and really they were contending, and so they didn't really have time to develop him. He goes to Atlanta of all places randomly and just kind of puts up some decent numbers, and Dallas calls him up, gives him a shot, and he's been pretty efficient for them. He's been a nice little player off the bench. He's very athletic too. He's a dunker. He's one of those dunking guys. He'll dunk on you, and he can shoot threes too. That was a big thing that he developed, which made him into a solid rotational player at this point in his career. He was drafted in the same year that Wade Randall was drafted, but he's only played in 5 seasons, so he didn't play in 2 seasons. Bernard Hood is the backup point guard. Jeffries being the backup shooting guard, and then Baylor was the backup small forward. But Bernard Hood, the backup point guard, this dude has had a very up and down career. I think I talked about him in one of the previous videos, but he was drafted to Minnesota. He was a 2nd round pick back in 2074. They needed a point guard. They desperately needed one, actually. And so he played immediately. As soon as he was drafted, he got some decent minutes. And he was very efficient. Look at these numbers. 48% from the field goal percentage, 43% from 3, 96% from the line, 6 points a game off the bench for a 2nd round pick. Like, that's a win. The next year, he averaged about 8 points a game, 50, 40, 90, like 51, 45, 99, actually, to be more exact. But still, he's only 6'1". He's not super muscular or athletic or anything. So he's efficient, but not like, he's not going to be winning games necessarily for you. He's not going to like will your team to a win or anything like that. But he's a steady guy off the bench that was dependable. And he gets shipped to Boston actually in 2077 because at this point they didn't have the need for point guards like they did when he was drafted. So they had added a few more point guards to the team at this point that could overtake him. And so they shipped him off to Boston, who actually needed a point guard. And he was in Boston for a couple of years, and he actually got a starting job in Boston in 2079 and in 2078. He was playing as their starting point guard, which as a 2nd round pick, 6'1", who's not a scorer, he's not a volume scorer, he's not like a super crazy defender. Like, that was really telling of how efficient and how just dependable he is, because usually starting point guards in this league are really good, and he was probably one of the worst starting point guards in the league. Not gonna lie, like, I hate to say that, it like that because it makes him sound bad, but objectively speaking, he probably was. But regardless, he got a starting job, which is something that a lot of point guards in the league cannot say, especially 2nd round, 6'1". Okay, with like a 6'2" wingspan. He doesn't have a crazy wingspan either. Like I said, he doesn't have the greatest physical tools whatsoever. But he's a 2nd round pick. He may do what it do, baby. He just does. He has a 6'1" wingspan. Even worse. I thought it was. I gave him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. I thought he had 6'2" wingspan. 6'1". All right, so that's even worse. But anyway, he was in Boston. He did his thing. In his starting season, he averaged 16 and 10. So he averaged a double for the season, which was a really nice achievement for him. Especially given his draft stature and all that. He gets shipped to Brooklyn, where again he finds himself in a starting role, which was just crazy because Brooklyn was actually a contender for much of the 70s. And so in 2080 he gets traded to Brooklyn, and they ended up trading away Herb Sessions, who is on OKC right now. Yes, they traded him away in the offseason of 2081, and so that left Bernard Hood. He was brought in to be the backup point guard, but they traded away Herb Sessions, who was their superstar point guard. They traded him away to OKC because they were bad. Or not because they were bad, but because they had kind of been disappointing or whatever. That's not the point. But anyway, Bernard Hood finds himself once again as a starting point guard in this league. And this time he averaged 17 and 11, 1.7 steals. So this time he was even better. And they made the playoffs, actually. And I think they even made a couple rounds. They might have even won a playoff series when he came at the helm. Let me check. Where's my my stats at. I had my stats in front of me. I don't know where they went. But anyway, they might have even won a playoff series or two. I can't remember, but I know they made the playoffs with Bernard Hood at the helm, which was very important for his legacy, you know. Because without that, he would have just been condemned to a backup point guard role his whole career. Because that's really what he should be, for being honest. He probably should be more like that. They didn't win a lot with him as the point guard because you just can't win a lot with someone as small as him. You know, you need to be able to create advantages in the playoffs, stuff like that. So, anyway, all that to say, he gets shipped off to OKC, ironically enough, with Herb Sessions to back him up once again. And he wins the championship, 2083. He was the backup point guard for the winning OKC championship team. And that rose his stock exponentially. I mean, he had already had some starting roles and stuff, but this really put the icing on the cake, you know? So they were like, you know what, this dude is solid. I mean, the next year he was still solid. They didn't win the championship, but he was still good. The next year, however, 2085, he fell off a cliff. That year, but you know, maybe he had something in his personal life going on. You know, maybe his wife broke up with him. Maybe something happened. I don't know. But he fell off a cliff. He was averaging 41% from the field and only 31% from three. And this is a guy who averages well over 40% every single year. And unfortunately for Bernard Hood, the team was losing. Despite being such a good team, they were losing to start off that year. And they ended up trading Bernard Hood plus some other guys for Juan Carlos Chavez. Yes, the GOAT, basically. They ended up getting Juan Carlos Chavez from the Utah Jazz. And they ship off Bernard Hood to the Utah Jazz in exchange for him. And as we know, the OKC went on to win the championship that year after they traded Hood for Chavez. And so that was a great trade for them. But for Hood, not so much. He goes to Utah, who was god-awful at this point, and he's riding the bench for a god-awful team on a pretty big contract. And so it just wasn't a good look. You know, it was like he was overpaid. He's not playing. Like his numbers were so bad that he's just unplayable damn near. Like they just didn't feel the need to give him many minutes because they had young point guards that were developing. So why play Bernard Hood if he's not even going to play that well? So that was some soul searching. He did a lot of soul searching that second half of that year. He ends up getting shipped off to Chicago for a couple games this season, 2086, in the beginning of this year, and then they shipped him off to Dallas for like crumbs on the dollar, you know, as a throw-in for some other guys, some more important guys. But Bernard Hood is their only backup point guard, really, besides this guy Edmund Sullivan, who actually was fantastically efficient during his rookie year. He averaged 69% true shooting percentage, which is crazy, off the bench, yes. So take with a grain of salt, only averaged 8 minutes a game. But I mean, that's really, really promising, to be honest, especially for a second-round pick. He's only 6 foot, and he was the 11th pick of the second round in 2085 as a rookie. He averaged that high of a true shooting percentage. So they were going to just roll with him in the playoffs, but they ended up picking up Bernard Hood just as a little bit of an insurance policy. You know, they didn't really want to rely on a rookie point guard, you know, to be their backup. And then they got this guy, Corey Clark, 2080, 7'2", drafted 2080 and the 29th overall pick. And, you know, he started off in Dallas for the first couple years of his career. He was drafted here in Dallas. And then we shipped him off to Cleveland, ironically enough, because look at these numbers. He was only averaging about 54 to 58% true shooting. And as a 7'2" big man, that was just like, what the fuck? Like, dude, you're so tall. Like, just put the ball in the basket. Like, why are you inefficient? So, like, he wasn't inefficient, I guess, but he's just not, you know, dominating or whatever. And they really hope that he could be next to Wade Randall, because if Wade Randall could be the power forward at like 7 foot, and then you have a big ass Corey Clark in the middle, 7'2", like blocking shots and stuff, that would be amazing. But he just didn't pan out like that necessarily, especially earlier on. And so they end up shipping him out to Cleveland for some other guys, whatever. And then he ends up in Denver. And then Dallas calls up Denver and says, actually, can we get that guy back? We actually want him back. Like the Jackson 5, I want you back. All right, they wanted him back because he was one of the only guys that has that skill set that he had. He's a good rebounder and stuff, and he's a decent paint defender, and he's extremely tall. He's 7'2", and so they're like, that would be a good pairing alongside Wade Randall. And he had actually improved since departing from Dallas originally, and so they ended up getting him back. But he didn't improve so much that he was unattainable. You know, they just gave up some decent players, whatever. They got him back, second round picks, etc. And then Dave Bradley, they got him from Charlotte in the Ted Fleming trade back in 2083. He hasn't really played very much for Dallas. He was a 15th overall pick back in 2081. Came in with some solid potential. If you look at his per 36 numbers, they look pretty decent. But, you know, he just wasn't super duper efficient. Not really super trusted to be the point guard in the playoffs, so he doesn't really play very much. Al Calloway, he was a former 4th overall pick. Now, this guy was actually an all-star in Milwaukee and in San Antonio. So, he only made one all-star team in 2080. But all these years from 2075 through 82, he was averaging 25 plus. Okay, 26 plus actually, and that was for Milwaukee and San Antonio. And so the same thing with Matt Brand and Henry Gilbert. Like I said, like sometimes, and Al Callaway's on a pretty big contract, so there's like, look, just take him, right? Just take him, because he wasn't playing very well. This season, he was averaging 38% from the field and 30% from three. Again, he's a former All-Star, and he's only 30 years old, so he just fell off a cliff. We're not really too sure what's going on with him, but whatever. Tyrone Doyle, 19th overall pick this past year, he's been pretty terrible, but he was brought in to be a project. You know, he's not going to be great immediately, but you know, we were hoping for something a little bit better. But anyway, we got Eldon Watkins here, 6'5", shooting guard, pretty good work ethic, pretty good, decent little stats. We'll probably keep him around, and I think that he can be pretty nice for them down the line. They got him as well from Charlotte, from the Ted Fleming trade, and so they're getting a lot of guys from these trades. You know, just a lot of different bodies. You know, they got like 3 players from Dallas. I mean, they got 3 players from San Antonio, 3 players from Charlotte in both those deals, and you know, so I say all that to say that they had an accelerated rebuild with Wade Randall, because he came in and he was so good so immediately, and he was kind of old. So they had to speed up the process. They hit on their draft picks. They gave up all their assets for Henry Gilbert, and they kind of filled off the bench with whoever they could get their hands on. And so here they are in the second round, facing off a 2-time former champion in OKC Thunder. So we will see, man. We will honestly see. But this team is super duper lethal, super duper athletic, super young, and like, so they have a lot of talent. They just have a lot of talent, and they have just great players and stuff. So which is why they were able to beat Lakers despite them only being the 8th seed. So who knows? They won game 1, so maybe they can win more in this series. So this is going to be a very good series, very tightly contested series. And I'll check back with you guys in the next one, you know, with the results of game 1. I'm not going to show the footage in the video, but I hope you guys enjoyed that lore breakdown. I know that was a lot. I know it was a lot. That's the point of the videos, though. Like, you got to understand, like, I'm making these in order to explain the full backstory, okay? So you can really understand and really grasp what's going on and why each player matters and stuff like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you in the next video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to comment down below what you want to see next. And I will see you next time. Peace!